This is the Mental Mettle Podcast, and I am your host, Coach Thomann. I'm a former athlete, teacher, coach, and athletic director that switched careers after surviving cancer and a stroke in the fall of 2020. But I'm also a dad of a son and a daughter that were successful high school athletes that went on to college. Now I use that experience along with my ICF coaching certification when helping teams, coaches, and athletes from all over the country. Each week, I will pose a specific question that will help coaches of all types better understand mental toughness. In the Mental Mettle Podcast, coaches will learn to help their athletes overcome adversity without being the adversity they need to overcome. Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle Podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle Podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your mettle. And welcome back to the Mental Mettle Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Coach Thomann, and I'm here with exciting episode. It's just me. I don't have a guest today, but this has been a long time coming, a series that I've been wanting to do to put out for parents and just how they can help athletes have their athletes through the praise that they give to their kid, because that's ultimately a lot of times that's the only thing the parent can do is with that praise. I mean, other than, putting them in the stuff and driving them there and stuff like that. But I get parents that ask me all the time, it's like, I don't know how to help my kid. And it's fair. And this is part 2 of a series. If you didn't hear part 1, I highly suggest you go back. I talk a little bit about, the stressors and stuff that today's athletes under and how it's a little bit different. And we start talking about part 1 in part 1 about how important it is to focus on the controllables and make sure that our praise and our thoughts towards our athlete goes towards things that we can actually control, which is also to say, make sure that our praise or our comments are not directed towards things that we can't control. Like, fair and, easy and obvious is, things like officials and coaches. If we focus on that in our conversations with our kids, or the things that we yell or the things that we say, it's going to leave them feeling very apathetic because they can't control those things and they want to make you happy. They want to win. And so it's a great episode. If you want to go back and listen to it, I highly suggest you do. And also, if you're a parent and you're checking this stuff out and you're like, this is really good stuff, I enjoy it, I am not putting this out there just so that your athlete can win all the games. I think it can. I think it can help, and it'll help you and help your athlete and help you in all sorts of ways. But it's not like, I'm not just trying to give some secret sauce here so you win all the games. I'm trying to move everybody forward a little bit. And I think that if we can do that, we all benefit if everybody's playing more mentally tough and more in a positive way. So what I'm saying here is, if you like this stuff and you hear this stuff and you want to help others, share it, post it, put it out there, give them my information so they can check out the podcast. This is a free resource I'm putting out there. And again, this is all from information that I'm given in my own unique way, sharing that information. And it comes from years of being a basketball coach, and then years of having to use positive psychology on myself after having a stroke and a really hard time for a while. And then the training I've got into becoming an ICF coach. And then for years now working with athletes and what they struggle with and what will help them. And so I'm taking all this information and just putting it all together in a podcast, a 3-part podcast, and getting it out there for the parents to digest and hopefully use. So yeah. So check out part 1 if you haven't, and then we're going to jump into part 2. So part 1 was definitely about focusing on the controllables and praising the controllables. And part 2 is about positivity. And I know that seems obvious, but trust me, I'm going to get into a lot more than that. It's more specifically about developing, fostering, and using a positive voice over a negative voice. And it might seem obvious, well, hey, just be positive, but I get a lot of pushback about positivity. It gets a bad rap sometimes. It gets seen the wrong way. So especially when I'm talking about talking to yourself in a positive voice, like with affirmations and things, immediately at somebody my age, you go back to the old Saturday Night Live skit with Stuart Smalley, if you remember that, the really soft, goofy guy staring at the mirror in the cardigan, talking about I'm good enough and I'm smart enough and gosh darn it, people like me. Like, that's meant to be funny, and it's poking at a little bit of this psychology. That's really not, I mean, that's fine. If that's the positive affirmations he wants to give himself, I'm not going to give him a hard time, but I think it doesn't do it service because it seems like that guy's really soft. And if you were playing against that guy in a sport, you're like, I would dominate that guy because he's not very tough and he doesn't appear to be very tough. So what I try to do is I'm trying to mix that positivity that we have to have. And I'm going to try to convince you that in this podcast today, that positivity that we have to have, and mix it with toughness. I've always been a tough person, and I could tell you stories growing up and these things. I'm a kind of a tough guy, but it failed me for a while. Just trying to be tough, and trying to get things done and beat myself up. And it just about broke me for a while. And then I finally, with the positive psychology, realized, hey, I can be tough and positive. I don't have to be hard on myself. And the name of my business, Mettle Coaching, is on purpose. And I've got the word mettle in there on purpose. Mettle. It's kind of an old school word. You don't hear it all that much, but it's a very important word. And I'll give you the definition to help you explain why. It's a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. So first of all, it's about the adversity. And if we're playing sports and in life, there's going to be adversity. In no way, shape, or form am I saying, hey, get away from the adversity. I like to lean into the adversity. I want to feel the adversity. I want you to be excited about facing the adversity. And that's just it. It's not running from the adversity, but facing it in a spirited and resilient manner. And it's that word spirited that's so important to me. Spirited means to do something enthusiastically in an excited way. It's connected to your soul, right? When you're doing something with spirit. And that's what I'm looking for, is that facing adversity and overcoming challenges and kind of enjoying it. I got a buddy that he works out all the time, and he probably stole it from somebody, but he loves to say, embrace the suck, right? Like, hey, I'm going to get a workout in. And he doesn't go into it like, oh, I got to go get this workout in. No, he was like, hey, this is going to be tough and I'm going to love it and I'm going to enjoy it. And if you say, if you're not in that place where you can enjoy hard things, it seems like nonsense to you. But that's what a mindset is. It's changing our mind about situations. And that's what I'm looking for when I'm trying to develop somebody's mettle. I want them to actually learn to lean into adversity and say, hey, I'm excited about this. This is going to be fun, right? And we all know people that are extremely tough people. They grind, they get up and they work out every day, or they go to work every day and they do the really tough things, but they're not positive, and they're also miserable. And you can operate that way if you want, but and we're going to talk about it, but the studies show that it's some long-term damaging effects if you want to continue to operate that way. And you should really start to develop your positive voice over the negative voice. And I know that I'm going to get in here And I'm going to start talking about how you can apply this with your kid and how you can teach your kid some stuff. But I'm going to keep saying it. If you want to develop a positive voice and a positive attitude in your kid, you better have it yourself, because it is next to impossible to foster a positive attitude in someone else whenever you're walking around in a negative attitude with negative voices in your head. It just is. And so you've really got to learn to want that positive voice and foster that positive voice. And it's not easy, because I think there's a lot of people out there that think that negative voice is the way to go. There's some influencers out there, like social media type people, that really lean into that negative voice, constantly telling about what you can't do, what you won't do, and use it as motivation. Look, I've read both of David Goggins' books. If you don't know who David Goggins is, he's the Navy SEAL turned runner, does all these endurance things, and he's a motivating individual. You read some of his books. He is motivating, but he really leans into the negative voices. And I mean, he does some things that, just like he is a premier athlete in what he can handle with his body, I think that he can handle things in his mind that others can't. And I think that if you lean into that negativity too much, because he's really hard on himself, he calls himself these names, and if you listen to it, you'll get it. And it's it can be motivating short term. It's good, but I don't think it's a long term plan. These people that talk about, hey, if you're not getting up at 5 a.m. to get your workout in, like, you're wasting your time and you're doing this. And there's some good things for that. You can, like I said, do these hard things. You can get up early, you can do things, but I think that you have to change your mindset. And it's not, your voice does not need to be about what you're not doing or what you can't do. Your positive voice and that inner voice needs to be about the things that you can do and that you want to do. It's a huge difference, right? And I think that a lot of people operate in that I'm my own worst critic area, and that might be you. You might be like, "Oh, I've always been my own worst critic, and that's how I get better." Okay, and you can be tough, you can be hard on yourself, but a lot of times you probably feel terrible, right? And you might want your kid to be that way. It's not a good long-term plan. And it's not just me. I see it in kids that have operated that way for a long time, and then they get into high school, they get into college, and it starts to break them. And the research is pretty clear on this stuff. If you use a negative voice, a couple of things about the negative voice is that the negative voice is a liar, just an absolute liar, and it tells us things that aren't true. And if we use that as a motivator, and we're using these lies to tell us are these things that aren't true, and if it needs to get our attention, all it does is it starts getting louder and it starts going on repeat. And we've heard those voices in our head. And you can start with this little negative comment that might seem really benign. And it could be something like, hey, I really suck today, right? It could be at a game, could be at work. It could be something you say, hey, I really suck today. And if you allow that negative voice to perpetuate and grow over time, it becomes these obviously negative, false statements that you would never believe, but people say to themselves. It's like, hey, I'm the worst player ever. I'm the worst parent ever. I should just quit. I should never do this again. That's, and there's just not any truth to that. And if you allow your negative voice to continue about your failures, it'll start to get there. It'll start to grow. It'll start to get louder. And if you let that negative voice grow, you start doing what psychologists call rumination. Now, rumination is when you really start chewing on, and that's the old, that's how we think about cows. They chew their cud and stuff. And I think that's where it came from. You really start chewing on past mistakes, things that you did wrong, things that you wish you'd done different. You're guilty. You're resentful for things that people have done. just mistakes, all these things. And they've done a lot of research on this, and it is rumination and or sometimes we call overthinking about the past, especially, is that it becomes, over time, it is a very strong precursor to some very serious mental health issues. It starts into a little bit of anxiety, starts to work into depression, and before long, your rumination is turned into some serious mental health issues. And we see it. We see it with athletes. It happens a fair amount. We see some really phenomenal athletes at the youth level, high school level. They get into college and they have operated under this idea of beating themselves up and always having to win and always have to do this. And they have been successful for a long time and have been really good at this stuff, but at what cost? The cost is their own mental health, and it's not worth that. And then the negativity is not the reason they were successful. You can do it with positivity and forge that mettle and enjoy that adversity in a positive manner. And if you want to flash back to what we talked about last episode, we were talking about making sure that you focus and talk about and have conversations about the controllables. The past is an uncontrollable. And if you focus, and we talked about, if you focus too much on the uncontrollables, it builds up that anxiety. So if your inner voice is really focused on those the past and past mistakes, it's going to lead to some anxiety, some issues. And again, this is something I want you to do for yourself as the parent, as a coach, but it's something you need to start working on with your athlete. And that's some of the dangers for the negative voice. But now let's talk about the positive voice. There's a lot of research there too. And a lot of this, I'm not citing any sources. You can look it up. You can trust me if you want, or you can look it up. But also, it's because it's not just one source. Theirs is just a plethora of sources out there. Sorry, I say the word plethora, and I get to the Chevy Chase and Martin Short movie with it's Three Amigos. But anyway, do you know what a plethora is? Coaches, do you dream of guiding mentally tough athletes towards a championship? Kids that are resilient, persistent, and unshaken by setbacks. Well, in today's world, those athletes aren't born. They have to be developed. Many athletes face significant challenges and risk burnout. So how do we foster that mental toughness without overwhelming them? Well, introducing the Ember to Inferno program, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. This series is designed specifically for coaches, offering a deep dive into your own journey of mental toughness and equipping you with practical tools to build confidence and belief in your athletes. Rather than just simply adding more adversity to their life, we focus on creating a strong foundation for mental resilience. You'll learn how to transform a spark of motivation into a blazing fire of toughness using techniques that address challenges like social media pressures, athletic stress, and trauma. Don't just wish for mentally tough athletes, build them. Join the Ember to Inferno program today and ignite the potential in your athletes. For more information, contact me, Coach Thomann, at Mettle Coaching. Parents, is your athlete ready for the upcoming sports season? They might have the strength, the speed, and the skills, but without confidence, they could still struggle when the game is online. Skill and strength are great. They're necessary, but they're not used to their full potential without the right mentality. Confidence is key. It's the key to unlocking that full potential. And at Mettle Coaching, I offer personalized sessions designed to build the confidence your athlete needs for a successful season. My proven techniques empower them to perform under pressure, both on the field and in life. Don't let a lack of confidence hold them back. Book a free session today and discover the power of confidence. Visit the website and get started on the journey to a more confident and successful athlete with Mettle Coaching. So anyway, but there's a plethora of resources out there. And what they say about the positive is even more amazing than what it says about the negative. The first thing that they have linked, if you have a positive inner voice, the number one thing it said is connected to is it's just an increased lifespan. Okay, no big deal, right? Forget everything else. We could just stop there, right? People that have operated with a positive inner voice for their entire life tend to live longer than people that don't. So again, you could have like, oh, I'm my own worst critic and this is how I get things done and then how I get successful. And then fantastic. You just get to die early with heart disease and high blood pressure, because that's what it's linked to. But before that, if you operate in a positive voice, you've got lower rates of depression, less distress, less pain, greater resistance to illness, and just overall, not just better psychological, mental well-being, but actual physical well-being as well. And if you're like, okay, but that's long-term, I want to talk about my kid. I think my kid really needs this negative voice to be able to compete. If it's actually that important to you to focus on the short term versus the long term, okay, there's plenty of research there that the positive voice is the best way to go. They did a study with some little basketball kids, and they figured out that it was a camp, and if the kids practiced positive self-talk, they actually acquired and performed basketball skills faster. They did a study with some basketball players and noticed that if they use self-talk and a little visualization, their anxiety at the free throw line was down, and they had two controls, two groups, one group that did self-talk and one that didn't, and the one that had the self-talk actually made more free throws in a game. That's points on the board. That's a way that your game is going to get better because of positivity. They did one with 10K runners, and if you run at all, you know that you have a lot of time for the voices in your head to just start working. And if you let that negative voice go during the race and during a run, it can eat you up and actually decreases your endurance. And they said, well, they did a study, and the more positivity a runner used in their mind, the more endurance they had. They actually had better times. They did another one with kind of like it was basically some athletes doing something like an NFL combine where we're just doing things, measuring metrics, and this one just happened to be on vertical jump, and the players that practiced positivity and positive self-talk actually increased their vertical more than the others. It's there. That's just like 4 different studies that I've read about it, but it's enough to convince me that Mettle is the way to go. Is like, hey, I'm going to do something hard. I'm going to play basketball. I'm going to run this 10K. I'm going to do this, but I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm going to find a way to be positive about it and have affirmations and have that positivity with toughness. And again, that's something that you need to be working on yourself with your athlete, and it's something you need to start working on with your kid. If you don't like studies, there's an old, I don't even know where I got this. This has been out for a long time. I couldn't even find the source. I don't know where it came from, but it's an old story if you've never heard it. It's a cool story. It's the Tale of Two Wolves. I'll read it to you here. I think it's supposed to be written like it's a Native American story. I don't know that it is, but somebody made it like it is. And I don't really care it comes from, because it's one of these little parables or whatever that kind of tell a story and make us think. So the story goes like this. The Tale of the Two Wolves is an old Cherokee chief was teaching his grandson about life. And the chief said, there's a fight going on inside me. And he told the young boy, there's a terrible fight between two wolves. One wolf is evil. He's full of anger, sorrow, regret, self-pity, false pride, arrogance, superiority, even inferiority. And the other wolf is full of all these good things and joy, peace, gratitude, love, humility, kindness, faith. And not only the Cherokee chief said, not only is this fight going on inside of me, it's a fight going on inside of you and inside of every person on earth. And the grandson, kind of thought about this for a minute, and he asked the grandfather, and he said, which wolf is going to win? And the old man just gave him a smile and said, hey, the one you feed. And that makes sense because we can see it. Whatever you feed is going to grow. If you're going to feed anger and regret and self-pity and those things, it's going to grow. That's again, I talked about it in the last episode. You might want to check it out, a little bit about neural pathways. We develop neural pathways. Okay. And if you constantly think in a way that is anger and regret, it's going to feed, and you're going to build that pathway, and you're going to see it in everything your athlete does. You're going to be angry about the officials. You're going to be angry about the coach. You're going to be angry about the other players. You're going to build that, right? Others who have not developed that pathway aren't going to be like, look at you and be like, what are you talking about, man? Like, you're way off. But it's because you've allowed it to grow, and your athlete can do the same thing. But if you start to feed your positive wolf and your positive ideas, they're going to grow. Right. And if I'm saying some of this stuff and you're like, man, he's talking to me, I don't know what to do. I've always had this negative voice. I've always felt kind of awful about things when I'm trying to get things done or when bad things happen. I'm going to let you know, you're not alone. A lot of people operate this way. I think most people have this very predominant negative voice that we have to keep in check. And I've found a lot with really high level athletes. And I think the athletes get to where they are, they start these expectations and they have these abilities and they want to be able to do this. And sometimes sports can be so binary, black and white, that we start focusing on the winning and losing. And when we lose, it becomes an issue. And that voice can really get out of hand. And it's one of the first things, anytime I work with athletes, when I do this coaching with athletes, we have to get it in check. And it's something I want you to get in check as the parent, or if you're listening to this as a coach, you need to check your voice. You need to start owning it and recognizing it. Anytime we want to make a change, right? If we want to change anything and make something better about ourselves, the first step is we have to actually recognize the issue, and then we can change it. Okay. So recognizing your negative voice is really important. And just if you're listening to this and we have a conversation about it, I think that just by listening to it, you'll start to listen. You'll start to notice it a little bit. I'm not telling you to do this so that you feel bad about it and be like, oh, I'm the worst. I have this negative voice. I want you to do the opposite. I want you to just, without any judgment, just start listening to that negative voice. And when you're watching your kid play, think about those two wolves. What emotions are you feeling? Is it anger? Is it greed? Is it jealousy? Is it self-pity? What are you feeling? And sometimes you can pick up on the words, right? Like, is it my kid's never going to do this? This is never going to happen. They just don't get it. Why are they doing this? If you start asking questions like this, listen to that negative voice and figure out what's its driving force. What's it trying to push? And I know that it's like, well, I know that I want my kid to do the best they can. I get it. But what's the deep-seated issue that you have? And sometimes it's angry, it's jealousy. You just, why can't my kid, I wish my kid had this opportunity, or he's not getting this, or she's not getting this opportunity. She's not getting this scholarship. If she just had this chance, right? Think about where it's coming from. And then notice how that it's always really good. And the next, looking forward into part 3, we're really going to get into embodiment and how that makes us feel. So this is, I think really useful for you to make a point to listen to all 3 episodes, because they're all 3 connected, right? So a lot of times your negative voice is focused on things you can't control, right? And then if you have that negative voice, then it's going to affect your inner body, and you're going to, like, a lot of times that anger can feel like just like a hot ball of lead in our stomach when we're watching our kid play, right? That's all part of it. We're going to talk about that embodiment. So they're all connected, but I want you to start recognizing that in yourself. Where's my negative voice coming from? And then once you start realizing that you have this negative inner voice and it's an issue, I want you to make sure to look back and remember what I said about this negative voice. It is not useful. It is not helpful. It's not how you want to live a good long life, right? We're actually shortening our life by doing this. It's something we need to actually address. And once you recognize that negative voice, just say, "How I want to change it. I'm going to change it." All right. It's something I want to change. Once you recognize it, we want to change it. And you're like, "Okay, Coach Thomann, that's fantastic. But I've had this negative voice in my head, and I know my kid has it. I can't just say I'm going to change it." I know it's a lot harder than that. It takes intentional activities, intentional effort to change it. We're talking about changing our neural pathways, and that's hard. But I'm going to start with the easiest exercise I can do for you and your athlete to do together that's going to help start adjusting that voice. So this exercise that we want to do is all focused on gratitude, and it's a version of what they call the 3 good things exercise. And the 3 good things exercise has been done by, it's created by a guy named Martin Seligman. You can look him up. He's the founder of positive psychology. He's written a couple books. Flourish is one of my favorites, and he talks about one of the simplest, easiest, most effective intentional activities that any person can do to increase the happiness and fulfillment in their life is to write down or share with someone each night 3 things that went really well that day and why they went really well. They calls it the 3 good things exercise. It's something you're grateful for, or something you're grateful that you did well. What I want you to adopt is this version of it that you do with your kid after every game, after every practice. You know what I'm talking about. They come home after a game. They're taught, they get in the car, come home, and you're like, "I don't know what to say when it's either went well or it didn't go well, and I don't know what to do." Just because you've had some trust me, there's bad conversations taking place, and you never know how it's going to go depending on the kid and how you feel about it. And negative voices sure don't help that situation. So what I want you to do is the 3 good things exercise. You and your kid both talk about 3 things that went really well at that practice. 3 things that you're thankful for in that practice. And it's going to be a little bit of a struggle at first, but I promise you it is there. It's there. You just don't want to do it because you're focused in your negative voice. So this is that changing that neuroplasticity. You're going to have to focus on this, and it's going to feel really awkward at first. So start with gratitude. If you don't know where else to go, like, we want to look back at those 2 wolves and the good wolf, and you're like, hey, the positive things were like joy and like hope and things like that. Those are fantastics, and you want to put those in your voice, but you're like, I don't feel joyful right now. My kid just is struggling and we're losing. I don't feel joyful. I get it. All right. It's hard to just manufacture that. Gratitude is a great way to start. There was a philosopher, his name was Cicero, and his quote about gratitude is that gratitude is the father of all virtues. Whatever virtue you want, you can start to build it off gratitude. It all starts with gratitude. Gratitude is fantastic for, start giving gratitude to others, the coaches, gratitude to the officials, gratitude to the players, gratitude to everybody there, making sure that when you do your 3 good things, you are thankful for different things. gratitude is a phenomenal virtue to start build. I talk about the benefits of gratitude is it's so interesting. When people start to understand gratitude, they start to realize that giving thanks to someone does more for the giver than it does receiver. And we love it when people give us thanks. It's great. It's like, hey, somebody tells you thanks, and you're like, oh, that makes me feel good. Trust me, if you start to practice that, it's like one of the most selfish things you can do is start giving gratitude. And it seems backwards, but trust me, practice it. But if you can start with that 3 good things exercise, you're going to start building that positive voice, and then you can start changing it a little bit. You can change it into what you want. What do you need out of that positive voice? We'll talk about it a little bit next time when we talk about the third part and the embodiment and the mind-body connection is really important. But right now your negative voice beats you up and is full of anger. What do you want to feel? I want to feel joyful when I watch my kid play. I want to enjoy watching my kid. Wouldn't that be nice? So start developing that idea. Start thinking about words you would love to say. You're like, I love watching you play. Right? Saying that to your kid, even though sometimes it doesn't feel that way. Start saying it. Start saying it. When we are talking about neuroplasticity and changing neural pathways, it is awkward at first. It is like changing something on your golf swing. It's like changing something on your free throw shot. Somebody gives you a tip and you want to change it. And you're like, that doesn't feel right. Well, you're changing it because what you were doing wasn't working. Well, what you were doing wasn't working. If it feels awkward for you to talk to yourself in a positive voice around your kid, then maybe we're on the right path, right? It feels weird because it's working, right? And let's be honest, sometimes it doesn't happen and you don't make the change because you really don't want to change because that neural pathway is set. You're like, I hate that coach and I hate officials and they suck. All officials are terrible. All right. You got a long way to go to change that mindset, but you can start doing it. Right. And you just really need to, as the parent, it's your job to start mastering your own inner voice because it becomes the inner voice of your kid. I promise this is what I do for a living, and I work with a lot of athletes. And when we start talking about that inner voice, it's amazing how often the inner voice of a kid sounds a whole lot like mom and dad that I know, right? It really happens. So we talked about how the negative voice can be very negative and not negative, but of course it's negative. The negative voice can be very untruthful and very loud and tell all these lies. Whenever I'm talking about a positive voice and the things you need to tell yourself, the things you need to hear, it needs to be truthful. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. Talk about the things you're going to tell your kid that are truthful. I love seeing you play. I loved how hard you played. I love you being a good teammate. We can talk about anything. Talk in truths, right? Because they're going to know what's true and what isn't. And because a positive voice, to me, a positive voice is not when you say, I'm not going to just tell you to say, I'm going to win the championship. I'm going to win the championship. Okay. I'm going to win every game. I'm going to hit a home run every time because that's not really truthful. And your mind will figure that out, that that's just not true. Now we can say, hey, I am a good player. I am good at this skill. I am improving. I'm doing this. These things can help you hit home runs. They can help you win championships. But I think that for our positive voice to be able to be useful, you need to keep working and telling the truth. One of the ways you can apply that to your kid, because I know that a lot of people say this and we're like, oh, I want to give them 3 good things, but they really stink right now and they're not very good and they're not improving. Okay. Talk to them about what they want to improve on and start building a very controllable plan. All right. How are we going to put effort into what you want to get better at? Let's be honest about you're probably better at it than you think are. Talk about where the gratitude there, what progress you've already made. Give yourself some grace and some thanks, a pat on the back for what you've done. Talk about what's true and what's honest and say, this is a skill. I want to be a better shooter. Okay, fantastic. What do you need to do? I need to practice shooting and I need to make sure I'm looking for shots in the game to practice that. Those are controllable things. Those are controllable things. It's not about whether or not you're making the shots. It's not about whether or not, everything you're doing wrong. It's about what you plan to do. And it's a true statement. I'm going to do this. This is what I'm looking for. And it gives you something to talk about as the parent. Hey, I noticed you looking for your shots. I noticed that you were getting in the gym and getting extra shots up. And you can be honest and you can be positive and you can still hold them accountable. All right. You can still tell the truth. Just don't let it, I'm not saying you can't say negativity. I don't want it to be part of your inner voice. You can say, I noticed you didn't get in the gym as much as you wanted this week. Okay. I would love to see you getting in the gym more. Right. That's different than being a negative voice. Right. We have to hold people accountable. Parents, is your athlete ready for the upcoming sports season? They might have the strength, the speed, and the skills, but without confidence, they could still struggle when the game is online. Skill and strength are great. They're necessary, but they're not used to their full potential without the right mentality. Confidence is key. It's the key to unlocking that full potential. And at Mettle Coaching, I offer personalized sessions designed to build the confidence your athlete needs for a successful season. My proven techniques empower them to perform under pressure, both on the field and in life. Don't let a lack of confidence hold them back. Book a free session today and discover the power of confidence. Visit the website and get started on the journey to a more confident and successful athlete with Mettle Coaching. Coaches, do you dream of guiding mentally tough athletes towards a championship? Kids that are resilient, persistent, and unshaken by setbacks. Well, in today's world, those athletes aren't born. They have to be developed. Many athletes face significant challenges and risk burnout. So how do we foster that mental toughness without overwhelming them? Well, introducing the Ember to Inferno program, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. This series is designed specifically for coaches, offering a deep dive into your own journey of mental toughness and equipping you with practical tools to build confidence and belief in your athletes. Rather than just simply adding more adversity to their life, we focus on creating a strong foundation for mental resilience. You'll learn how to transform a spark of motivation into a blazing fire of toughness using techniques that address challenges like social media pressures, athletic stress, and trauma. Don't just wish for mentally tough athletes, build them. Join the Ember to Inferno program today and ignite the potential in your athletes. For more information, contact me, Coach Thomann, at Mettle Coaching. And also another thing about whenever you're creating that positive voice, make sure that you're not given something what not to do. All right. So Derek Jeter used to say the first thing you say or the last thing you say is the first thing you do. So we would never want our positive voice to be like, don't strike out. You would never tell a golfer, don't slice, right? Because you kind of like you're putting that in there. Your brain is already working on that negative pathway about what it feels like to strike out or to slice. Okay. So make sure that your positive statements are something they know can do. Like instead of saying don't strike out, you're going to say, I'm going to look for my pitch. All right. I'm going to swing hard. I'm going to see the ball and hit the ball. Those are positive statements. Those are true statements that you're going to try to do. And there's a huge difference. All right. Now, I know I'm throwing a lot at you here, but it's I know it's like a 45-minute here podcast. I get that you're not going to make this change in 45 minutes. This takes a lot of work to change the way you think. This is a way that you definitely need to have an accountability partner. If you're a parent, if you have a significant other, I think it's great for you guys to work on this positive voice together. You can talk to your kid about that positive voice. This is what's really so good about the 3 good things exercise. Tell them what you're doing. We're like, hey, we're trying to work on our positive voices. This is the best way to do it. And that's your conversation after a game. That's your only conversation about it. Right? You just have that conversation about 3 good things. You each give 3 good things, and then you just leave it and let it go and let them go about their day and act like sports isn't the most important thing in your life. But it's a good exercise. And I think that you need to have somebody that you're holding you accountable. You're holding somebody else accountable. If you want more to that, then I highly suggest you hire a coach, a, a mental coach like me. I do work with some parents. I've worked with parents before. It's really good stuff, but most of my stuff is with athletes. So if you're like, hey, this is really good and I'm going to work on myself, but I just don't know how I'm going to get this going with my kid and I know they need it, please give me a call. This work on voices is simultaneously the hardest thing to do and the most effective thing to do. If we can get an athlete's voice under control, I see so much progress. And we do more than what I'm doing here. We really get into the specifics about what you need from your positive voice, what you need it to say, how you want to feel about it. We start working on that embodiment, the controllables. And we really get into one of my favorite things to do with athletes is start working on that third person character. There's some research out there that if you talk to yourself in the third person, you actually have more success. And I know that feels weird, but it's kind of like, imagine I was walking on a balance beam over a pit of alligators. And if I'm saying, I can do this, my mind is seeing it from the first person perspective, knowing that if I fall in that pit, I'm dead. If we can switch it to the third person, second person would be fine, would be okay. You could say, instead of I can do this, you can say you can do this, and that's better. But even better is to say it from third person. And what that does is it makes our brain, the best way I say it separates the fear from the task. And it's almost like you can watch yourself do something like you're watching a movie and you're the hero and you want them to do it. And I know that seems a little bit weird, but this is what we're doing here. We're talking about ways to trick our brain. And you should, if you're wanting to have a little bit more fulfillment and develop that mettle and handle adversity, you can, trust me, life's tough. We need every trick we can get. And this is a really good one. So we start building characters for our negative and positive voices so that we can have conversations with these inner voices. And I know how goofy that sounds, but so long as we keep it in our mind, people don't think we're crazy. You're already having conversations in your mind with yourself. So it's not that weird to be thinking, this isn't just me telling me this. This is some negative character, Bob or whatever. And Bob's kind of a butthead. And I need to hear from Larry because Larry is a great positive guy. You can have these conversations with your head in your head and make a huge progress. And I see a lot of that with athletes. And I guess my point there is that's pretty involved and takes a lot of stuff. It is very much worth the time and effort. Get a hold of me. I'd love to work with your athlete doing that. It's good stuff. But today's episode is more about the parent. I want you to start finding ways to control your inner voice so that it rubs off on your kid. And so it changes the way that you speak to your kid. There's some really good tools there you're going to see the help. You're going to see the progress there and know that it's a slow thing. First of all, neuroplasticity is slow. Changing that mindset and changing that voice is going to take some time, take some effort. And the results you're going to see are not necessarily immediate, although I have seen some pretty quick growth with some kids before. Kids are more resilient than we are. So as soon as you start changing some things, you start to see some progress. But the progress I'm looking for is the long term. Remember that idea about the positive self-talk actually helps you live longer. Okay. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about making them feel better in their body, in their mind, being better, not just athletes, but better humans and more well-rounded, better embodiment, all those things. So it's a lot, I know, but I get really excited about working with athletes and people on the inner voices because it makes such a difference. And trust me, when I tell you, this is an issue I still have. I struggle with this, right? It is, like I said, it was simultaneously the hardest thing to do psychologically, but also where you make the most effort. When I control my voices, I do so much better. Personally, it's something I had to do, and it's one of the reasons I started training jiu-jitsu and competing, is because I was like, I need to practice on this. And I know that's a weird thing to get into jiu-jitsu, but that's why I was doing it, is because I wanted to get some more practice in adverse situations. And I noticed myself when I go into tournaments and I hear that negative voice, and I feel I'm so in tune with it now because I've learned this stuff, and I feel it in my body. I feel the stress. And the second I notice it, I purposely start making changes about my voice and tell myself different things, and I can immediately start to feel the change. And I definitely perform better with better results. And that's what I want. It makes me so much more confident, and it's what I'm looking for. And it's what I'm looking for in the athletes that I work with. So, this is a fun episode for me. It's one of my favorite topics. I love talking about it. And so if you have any thoughts, comments, please shoot me an email, shoot me a text. I would love to hear it. If you have any interest in me coming, talking to your team, talking to your school, I do professional development, talking with your coaches, talking with your son, your daughter, any athlete. I've worked with this as kids as young as 8 years old up through college. And I love seeing the progress. So reach out if you have any questions. I really appreciate you listening. I love doing this podcast, and I enjoy it, and I couldn't do it without listeners and people liking, sharing, subscribing. So that's about it for this episode. If you didn't check out episode 1, the last episode with the focusing on controllables for parents, I suggest you do. And I hope you tune in next week when we talk about the connection between the mind and the body, and how important that is for an athlete and for everyone, really. So, So hopefully I'll see you next week. And once again, I'm Coach Thomann. This has been the Mental Mettle Podcast. And always remember, forge your mettle. Thanks again for listening to the Mental Mettle Podcast, produced by Coraggio Media, sponsored by QuickCut, a video management platform for every level of play, and by Mental Mettle Coaching, helping athletes learn to face adversity in a spirited and resilient way. The Mental Mettle Podcast is created each week to help players develop more mental toughness, and that is something that will help all of us. So help me out and like and share the Mental Mettle Podcast with your friends. Until next time, keep forging your mettle.